IFRS for SMEs is a set of standards that were developed specifically for small and medium-sized companies. We have full IFRS, but full IFRS has been developed with the objective of providing an accounting framework for large, publicly accountable entities that are generally listed companies. And they developed with that in mind. As a consequence, when people started to adopt full IFRS, they realized there was a need for something different for smaller companies. And the ISB responded to an international demand for something to cater for the smaller side of industry. So IFRS for SMEs is essentially a set of financial standards that cater to the very specific requirements that smaller companies have. I think financial statements at the first instance are prepared to cater for the requirements of the users of financial statements. That's fairly obvious. Now, small companies tend to find that they have a different user base. Different user base because they are, generally speaking, closer to the entity, they have a better understanding of the entity, they have more ability to ask the entity questions directly. So at the first instance, when we think about smaller companies, it's about what the users want from financial statements. But in addition to that, we think about the fact that smaller companies tend to have less complex transactions, less complex activities, and smaller companies also tend to have less resources. Now, there's an overall caveat. When we talk about these small and medium-sized entities, what we're talking about is companies that are required by law or by convention to prepare general-purpose financial statements. Financial statements for multiple different sets of users. And we distinguish that from the circumstance where a small company only produces financial statements for one particular user. Let's assume the tax authorities or something along those lines. Those types of companies who prepare only for one set don't need a general purpose set of financial statements, so they wouldn't be using our standard. It is a self-contained set of standards, so it is completely independent from the full set of standards. You, as a company using IFRS for SMEs, will never have to look at the full set of standards. And that's important because the benefits of using the small set means that you don't have to read as much. At the starting point in thinking about IFRS for SMEs, we've removed topics that we think are not relevant for smaller companies, so topics that don't apply in a smaller company environment. We've also simplified much of the drafting, much of the language, and we've removed more complex options that are otherwise available in full IFRS. And then the next one we've done and we've thought about is that because of the different user requirements, we don't think the same level of disclosures are necessary. So the disclosure requirements are considerably simplified over full IFRS. IFRS for SMEs is currently permitted or required in 80 different jurisdictions, so that already gives you an idea of the geographical spread. Within those individual jurisdictions, we have generally found that there are far greater numbers of small companies than large companies. So although we don't have exact numbers on this, our evidence that we have indicates that it's used by multiple millions of companies in those countries. In 2015, we conducted a comprehensive review of the standard. That was in response to an undertaking we had made when we originally issued the standard in 2009, and was directly the consequence of us saying that we would like to let the standard settle in for a while, let people actually become used to using it, and then we would respond directly to implementation issues that arose from using the standard. We made very few changes. The general feedback we got was that the standard was working well in practice, and the consequence was that we only really need to make changes for clarification. There were a few issues that we changed which we think were quite important. We introduced an option to allow companies to revalue their property, plant and equipment, and that was a direct response to queries we'd received. But for the most part, what we did was clarifications. The consequence of that is that we do not expect much change in practice in using IFRS for SMEs. We think people will continue to use it and hopefully just understand it a little bit better. Going forward, we will only make changes to the standard on a 3-year cycle. So we'll provide a stable platform in terms of changes. Now, these new changes that we made in 2015 are due to take effect from 1st of January 2017.